Microphone check, testing. One Great Earth. Currently streaming. As we look at our most pressing issues that we've had, not of the year. If I were to have done most pressing issue of the year, it would definitely have been the wildfires in the Canadian Outlands. Those wildfires never really went away. They got smaller. But that smoke went away. That smoke dissipated. That smoke would also be one of the tops. But we're currently looking at just the more recent pressing matters, very recent, within the last week or so. Try to keep everything that we put out here in content as relevant as possible as it's happening, as the most recent live satellite that we have available. Now one of these is Iceberg A23a is on the move. I know it is the second A in that A23 actually is we'll draw over that. Yeah, sure, it's A23a, but it's a lowercase a. Yeah, fixed. Okay, I'll leave that there for a minute. There's the bigger belly on it. Nope. So let's zoom in on this. Not see it here immediately. Let's go to Sentinel-1 imaging, which is grayscale. A23, a longitude -61.8, -51.34. This is a strikingly well put together iceberg, considering that it's technically been on the move since 1986 when it first broke off, but it really wasn't on the move until the 2000s. Now this thing is curling itself into open waters after seemingly causing an earthquake that registered on seismic activity on these islands down here called the South Shetland Islands. And this thing kind of did a rotation where it has this armchair, almost armchair like feature right here. Can't tell the height difference between this and if it's sloping or if it's breaking off, but it is a stunningly large crack that's going through the top side, which is now the top side of this iceberg. You see, this thing rotated counterclockwise as it was hitting the South Shetland Islands, probably that sea rise, causing it to pivot and rotate and come up. I don't know if it's still rotating, because it looks to be making some pretty big gains, and it comes to, it has a far way to go before it gets into the open ocean, but it's probably not that far to go. Oh. Yeah, it's going to compete with the South Georgian Islands, but no telling where this thing's going to hurl itself out of the sea into the open ocean. It is massive. There's no, is it going to break apart? Is it going to reach a depth that it can't anymore, and all we see then is the surface? No telling how deep this thing is. There's reports of boats taking a long time out of their day to get around this thing. You think that's bad? Just imagine penguins trying to get underneath this thing and around this thing. As this thing constantly bobs as well, it's messing up everything with equilibrium when it comes to penguins trying to escape or just try to get around it. If they start settling on top of this thing and it gets to warmer water and collapsing, this thing is a penguin killer. You can't tell just how big this thing's going to be, and these predators are going to take advantage of that under this thing as it continue this wild journey. And as it begins this rotation around what I think is a rise in the seafloor, and it's loose. Let's go back to July. Let's go back to July. Nope, that's not going to work. Still need to be able to see where it is. Let's go back to early December. We can see these two here, these two halves. These are pretty large icebergs that keep getting frozen in place. So in December, this thing was right here. Pretty good stride south from where it currently is, and again, you can't see if this is actually a large crack that's going through the entire iceberg, because this thing coming into more open waters, that thing falls off as this thing just bobs in warmer waters. Could cause some pretty significant tidal wave activity. See this, I want to say this is a wave pattern behind it. Just how this is cleaned up right here up to this. This thing moves. It's going to be sending just wave after wave out of it as it's bobbing, rotating another 45 degrees or so. Now this is in August. Come on, there you go. See if I can get a better shot of it. Yeah, right there. So this was in August. Moved over 500 kilometers easy. since August. I'm not saying this is where it was in August. This thing did have quite a long stay until it probably slipped away from the surface that it was attached to. This is a glacier on its own that's been wandering the seas for decades, but just now being able to experience a different climate as it heads out to sea. Let's take a look here. It's filtered by months. Able to fetch image. That's fine, I don't need a time lapse. We don't need a time lapses anyway. Go back a few more days. This thing has been of great interest. I'm pretty sure the treaties that are all over Antarctica about not harvesting and not exploiting the resources, does that still apply to icebergs that are currently in the open ocean, international waters? Imagine a country that needs water badly, comes with a tanker truck and sucks off millions of gallons of water into some inflatable bag. Like, who knows? It's fresh water. It's enormous. It's 80 kilometers or so in from side to side or diagonally. And there's no telling just how big this thing is, top to bottom. That is the greatest mystery, because this thing could be melting as we know it, but since it's melting from the top down, it has so many more feet to go, or in case where this might have hit land at one point and broke off, and we're seeing what's the other half of it floating away. And I'm back, sorry about that. We have this giant iceberg that broke off decades ago. And it continues to flow. Now, this is July. July was the hottest month on record on the planet. This has been one photographic iceberg. It's definitely looking completely turned around, but it looks relatively intact. Only unless it got sheared off the bottom, and we're just seeing the top half now that's less than half of its current height float away. We might never know that. We do know that this thing is moving and it's pretty rapid, but if it's a quarter or half of what it was before, that's different too, because then there's another half of it that be bobbing around soon. I only say that because of it looked to have been stuck up here in the South Shetland Islands, and it's no longer stuck. We come back to our current date. And here it is, as it currently stands. Done a lot of rotation, especially for something so massive. But I don't know if this is deformation that's happening on this left side here. If this is sloping inwards. Again, these are questions we might never know because A, it's far too perilous to try to take samples on it. Because if you were to climb aboard on this thing, there's no telling if it's going to be able to support you, if you're going to fall through, if this thing's going to bob and weave, if it's thinner than we thought. Interesting. But again, this is a climate changer. This is an iceberg that always of great interest due to its enormous amount of melt possible. You can only get a glimpse of the side of these very cavernous sides here, side faces. Right here, right here, right here. That's A23a. Its current path. It's been I think we already looked at enough of this. Let's move on to the next point. The Sudd in South Sudan. So here is referred to as Sudd, South Sudan. We know that it's also a wetland from this itch here. South Sudan, these areas that are burning greatly, the same regions that we'll be looking at right now. Malacca up here, South Sudan, the White Nile. Sure the borders are up. And South Sudan is marred by political strife and civil war between the Rapid Support Forces and Sudan's own military. I won't be getting into details beyond that because it's still shaky. But as custodians of the land, what happens during a war? Things burn, and there are no firemen. Even though that it's in the cities, the wild that suffers the most. As we see these fires beginning to encroach along the borders of the wetlands. How do you put out fires of a wetland? How deep does it go? How deep is the peat? These are things and smoke that shouldn't be discovered by allowing this to happen. I'm not saying it's... I don't think anybody really allowed this to happen, but it's definitely going to become beyond saving after each side of the wetland is occurring fire. See here? This is rather dramatic, as you can see. The beginning of the month and the first, relatively free of fire. You do not see anything. It's just green, lush, vibrant flora and fauna. And just relatively the last few days, it's just been you see some fires in the southwest on this image that occur, that race all the way around. It's not one fire in particular, but it's a multitude of fires on each front. These active fire perimeters that are literally massive. Like, you know how many people it would take just to walk along those with their shovels? And that's even if any firefighting, wildland firefighting is being done. Are there being any kind of aerial dumps of water on these places of interest? When you have a country being torn apart by civil war, and you have hundreds of thousands of people that are being evacuated, that have been evacuated, are waiting to be evacuated, they might be hiding still throughout the cities. But in between the cities is a failure, as we see fires tear apart all on the outside of the Sudd. Fire races towards it. It is a sink, but not a kind of sink that can be exposed to as much fire as this. This is haunting. As we can see here, this size of this wetland, marsh, is some of the last on the planet. When this goes, there isn't a replacement. There's no way to eco-remedy a new wetland. You can't move where the climate targets. But we also have this down here in Paraguay and Bolivia, which are also seeing fires and smoke. Nothing thrives under smoke. So on another continent, hopes remain, but it's still a rainforest, a wetland. And then you have this over here, this giant biodiverse marsh, wet meadow, arid meadow. The two meet. And now it's going to be burned all around the place. Are these villages, are they volunteer firemen? Fire people? Fire persons? So as we can see, these fires are devastating to biodiversity of the flora and fauna, especially of migratory animals. Let's say the big five even. You can throw a giraffe in there. You have your Cape buffalo, lions, even cheetah, you know, because you have bush and brush fire, and that's its height. And both of those heights are bush or brush fire in these areas are going to be devastating to the predator population that requires a lot of stealth and a lot of trickery to be able to fool its prey into thinking that it's not moving fast, I'm just moving in bursts. Can't do that when you have nothing to hide around. Prey starts corralling around the areas that are just open and keep giving away the predator's spots. There's no breakup in the view of a hulking lion that is slowly trying to avoid eye contact with buffalo or impala, antelope. But they can't escape from this danger. Forest elephants, there's all kinds of very hardy already biodiversity, but you introduce fire to an ecosystem like this, it just spreads like a pestilence. And so we can see the smoke here. This is absolutely devastating. Even if you don't exactly understand the purpose of wetlands. I mean, it's permanently flooded. Wetland. Permanently flooded, always saturated, always getting a lot of rain. But what drinks all that? This huge marshy swamp. We need it. Otherwise, what's going to take in 6 months of rain in under 3 days? This is absolutely devastating scenes of fire that we're looking at right now. Go back. False color. This gives a better idea. All this black here, this is all burned land recently. When it starts turning to this more brownish color, that's just probably a few days. This isn't much. But let's take a look at the moisture index. It's like a painting. It's exactly what we're looking at and seeing. Fires just transiting around the area like it's not having a problem. Fire and heat drives away water and moisture. So what we'll get is a lot of moisture that becomes exiled from this. Go back to false color. I mean, they're burning right up into. You can see smoke. This is a cloud right here. We can see patches of previously burned land. This is all bumping up right to the Sudd. There are fires that are seemingly surrounding the entire area. We just went from northeast to south central of the Sudd, and fires just don't stop. A firestorm that could enter into the wetlands here could be over 700 degrees Fahrenheit. This is a global and international disaster. After this, there is no going back. There's no other wetland. They're all on fire. We were failed custodians of the land. We tried, I guess. But ultimately failed. Huge, massive fire that is just wind driven, just getting sucked into a vortex that is this wetland. Now we're looking at the northeast corner just beyond the wetland. See that there's no fire before the third, because fire is alien to this ecology. Just because, oh, fire is naturally occurring element in nature, it doesn't matter. Nothing thrives under smoke, and the fire spreads like just as fast as the wind blows. It can really cause some massive permanent damage to what is already a fragile ecosystem. In a state, the South Sudan, that is currently seeing a very complicated civil war with a lot of people suffering. I don't think during this time they're doing much for the wild when it comes to the fires that it is seeing. We can only hope that these fires weren't the result of these actions either. To punish people that were running away, I doubt they would flee to a wetland, but in a time of war when people are going in every direction, there's no telling what happens. All we know is that we see that there is fire, and it is surrounding the wetlands. All along this river here, is this the Nile? White Nile. They have all these massive, massive fires all along the White Nile River, just over the border. South Kordofan. We're looking at South Sudan right now, and these wetlands. All that dark brown patchy area is all fire. Terrifying. You can see just how hot these are burning. And you can see the smoke. Terrible smoke. Can't see the fire as it's too low of a brush or a bush fire. It's just referring to the height of the fire. Enormous fires. Look at all that smoke here. It's all just billowing out. This terrible white smoke. With an active fire perimeter that is all around the area affected. Several areas that look like they're having deep-seated fires of and around the Sudd. South Sudan. Now, we were looking at the Sudd here We're gonna look West Africa fires. And we go all the way west to Senegal, where you can see fires that are burning all along the place, everywhere. All these brown patchy areas, this is all fire in Senegal. But Senegal right now is being plagued by fires, but I can't tell if these fires started in Senegal or they worked their way west. There are several countries that had their their African Union membership suspended as a result of military coups recently. Does firefighting continue under a military coup? Because we're seeing some massive fires just... What? Senegal has to be plagued with smoke. There's too many fires that are happening too rapidly of each other. Pulling up the last 30 days of satellite images of the area. Some really deep burns that are causing this land all around to be converted to desert. All along the river. It just keeps looping and cycling. It's so much more to burn, but there's plenty left as fuel. If these are the results of deforestation, it's disappointing, but it looks patchy, it looks random, it looks wild. Doesn't look like it's anything intentional, but it's an enormous amount of wildland that's currently under fire. here in the north. Just shrouds in the west. These are some really vicious fires for land that is just pristine. Now, converted to ash. Everything that survives the fires will get sick from the smoke. As this smoke is sticking around these areas, it's not just moving as fast as the fire. Smoke just moves with smoke. Fire doesn't move smoke except when it's just propelling it out. Really fast moving fires to get in between all these scans. That's where we're at here with Senegal. Really just we were looking at West Africa. Now, next up actually is the deforestation, or the wildfires throughout Australia that are currently burning bushfires and brush fires, not wildfires I should say. Is the Ivory Coast deforestation, since this is right where we're at in West Africa anyway. Just take a look at it here. This fire at the beginning of the month. Seemingly starting just on the outskirts. Very dramatic scenes of fire that is currently still burning today. This is a rainforest, a jungle. We know that because we can come here. National forest. There's the national forest right next to the wetland. Really dramatic scenes that are unfolding here in the last few days. Probably the most dramatic I've seen, since this is a very protected area. This is the last of the wild. We're seeing the last largest of the wetlands, and last largest of the jungles, last largest of the forest. And all of them dump poison into the river systems they surround themselves with. we continue to look around. But it's ferocious. There's no undoing this damage. It doesn't matter who's in charge next or what's in charge next. If it's a military or if it's a politician, dictator, it doesn't matter. What's left to fight over? Rubble, dust, and ash. They will fight over it. Not worth it. We failed as custodians of this planet. And this is some of the last of the wild that we're seeing vaporize. Such precious fauna and flora. What's left? This is a wetland. Not wetland, it's a forest, the Zanzan region. This is something that's still happening currently. The first sign of fire, see the earliest in the 10th, and this fire looks to spread quickly everywhere. There's no excuse for this. This literally is the last of the wilds, and it's all on fire right now. It's definitely up there in the top 5 for me, as to be able to feel this, to be able to be mad. It's obscene. It literally is. I'm going to draw the border of this actual forest, this jungle. And it's literally on fire just in the border. How do you fight this? But you're not going to have to worry about it burning again because it's all going to be gone. No, it's going to keep burning whatever tries to grow back. This fire is massive. This is a devastating loss to the world. You're the largest wetland that's on fire, the largest forest of Africa that's currently on fire. If this is being deforested for any other purpose, like agriculture or anything, it's not worth it. We just lost some huge ecologies this month. The wetlands that are currently burning in South Sudan, and the fires that are currently plaguing this national forest and in the Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast. Now let's go back her up. We come down on Australia. And just immediately we can see some fires. This is more the Queensland side of the border, meeting Northern Territory. Not much left in Australia. Got South Australia, Queensland. Got some parks left in the Northern Territory, but a lot of it's New South Wales. See that darkened area? Oh, wildfire. I saw bushfire, brush fire. And this looks like a significant fire right here. See if we can tell how it burned. Not really, it's just there's a lot burning in the kilometers. That's an explosion of fire. An absolute explosion of fire. It just doesn't stop. It looks like smoke, yep. There's definitely smoke. Bushfires. A lot of smoke. Going over a river, making it sick. Might hear a dog bark. That's some big smoke. That's Western Australia. We're currently seeing massive signs of smoke, and it's really deep-seated burn here. Unusual amount of smoke. Now we currently looking for anything else. See a lot of patchy brown areas. Doesn't paint the whole picture because we gotta go and look at drought. We can see a lot of drought in northern territory, and let's say half of the wetland, half of the Western Australia land is currently experiencing drought. Minimal drought to experience in Queensland, as Queensland is still very moist and saturated, so the only thing they should expect is more rain. From more rain is more flooding. But this area right here, and this area right here, 2 areas of fire. Nothing too severe. But again, it's fire season, and we've seen a lot of fires come up and put down. As these fires, they start heading more east to more lush forest, grassy area. You get these weird fires that just pop up somewhere down a river, you know, so many miles away. Some terrible smoke here on the south side of this fire. Very active perimeters burning all along the place. In every direction. That looks like a very unusual burn pattern. Let's take a look at it. Go higher up. Whoa. This whole area here. It's rocked. You can see the fire starting right in the center. It just reduces this to just desert. That's gone. Looks like these rivers dried out. The fires caused so much damage. These massive blazes. This is a nightmare. Burn right next to an airport. And I mentioned there's an airport next to it and people start caring. It just reduced all this to cinder. This is one of the most dramatic changes, transformations I've seen. Just in a few short days. Let's take a look at the moisture index, because fire and heat drive away moisture and water. Bone dry. This is definitely one of the worst fires we've seen today. We've seen a lot of fires burning a lot of very precious natural resource. But that is the last that I had for today. If you could please like and subscribe, it helps me out greatly. Continue doing this project. It's a passion. All right. Thank you. Have a good night or day. Be safe.